what is a nervous system medicine practitioner, and how did your personal story sort of lead you to the work you do now and the book that you wrote?
Yeah, that's a good question. So currently, me and my co-author and co-founder of my company, Somia, and our program that teaches people how to heal on top of the book, um, we'd probably be the only self-identified nervous system medicine practitioners. And the reason why we've created that language is that the work that we do is we help people heal from what are considered conventionally to be management only kinds of syndromes and conditions, whether that be chronic pain, fibromyalgia, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, IBS, SIBO, certain kinds of allergies. There's a whole spectrum: POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, long COVID, Lyme. All of these things um, all have their actual origin. They're all physiologically real. People are in real pain. People have real gut dysbiosis and dysfunction. But the solution is not through treating the physiology. The solution is in treating the nervous system, in the neurology. And that at the very heart of it is two things happen. People that, whether they're aware of it or not, who have a history of trauma, whether that's big T or little t, all right, whether it was pervasive or just a single incident, if you have a history of trauma, if you have a history of significant stress, if you grew up in, your audience might have heard of the term ACEs, adverse childhood environment, like, your father was an alcoholic, divorced home, poverty, violence, you name it. All of these things tip the balance of your brain and nervous system from how it's supposed to be, which is essentially in a mode of regulation, a combination of what we'd call relaxed awareness, right? I know that once upon a time, this podcast was hosted by soldiers and, Navy SEALs. And, the best folks in combat have relaxed awareness, right? They're not in constant vigilance mode because that would burn them out, right?
Hmm.
But they're also
Hmm.
certainly not checked out. They have had this fine-tuned honing of their nervous system to both be at ease and ready. And believe it or not, that ready state of ease but awareness, comfort but readiness, of adaptability, of response, of knowing how to engage with threat, not with freezing or flying off the handle, but with skill and coordination. All of these things are the hallmarks of a regulated nervous system. Moreover, your ability to safely connect with other people, be in harmony with them, be in rhythm with them, feel love, etc. All of these things are that. But when you grow up in the environment I just described a moment ago, your brain and nervous system can't do that. They've basically been tilted towards survival in a dysregulated fashion, on a war footing, vigilant for threats, in some variation of a fight, flight, freeze, or collapse mode, even if it's functional. Okay, like, yeah, you can still live your life, but you're constantly overthinking, you're constantly anxious, you're still living your life, but you're fucking tired and hopeless all the time, right? All of those are nervous system dysregulation. And when you're in that state, your nervous system can't take care of your physiology. Your gut can't function correctly, right? Your pain response blows up because your nervous system is in constant state of alert. Your immune system starts to go crazy and do whack stuff because it's viewing even benign irritants, for example, let's say gluten or pollen, as a big threat and goes AWOL, right?
Hmm.
Or after you get an infection like Lyme or COVID, it's not able to bounce back. And so, what we do as nervous system medicine practitioners is we teach people how to regulate their nervous system so that their physiology is able to self correct.
Hmm.
And there's more to it, but that's what we do.
Fascinating, fascinating. So, what are some examples of ways you teach people to regulate their nervous system?
Yep. So, first, it begins with actually teaching people what state their nervous system is in. So, people ask me all the time, what techniques or skills should I use? And it's like, well, what's your problem? Right?
Hmm.
Because nervous system regulate dysregulation is not all the same. Um, But essentially, we'll talk quickly about something called the polyvagal system. You're almost everyone's familiar with the fight and flight response, right? The sympathetic response. And then people are familiar with their kind of parasympathetic, their rest and digest response.
Hmm.
But the actual survival hierarchy goes like this from top to bottom, which is from more active to less active, which is fight, flight, fawn, appease, freeze. And then after freeze, we start to go into things like collapse, shutdown, immobility, uh, isolation, fainting.
Wow.
There's this spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So I like to say that at the very, very top of the survival spectrum, like if you think about like the extras in Jurassic Park or any horror movie, the one that goes "Ah," and like just runs off in a random direction and they instantly get eaten, that's the
Yeah.
most aggressive version of the sympathetic system, right?
Okay.
On the bottom of it, right, is the person who sees a needle when they're about to get blood drawn and they simply faint.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's the dorsal response. That's the collapse response. So your brain is always determining danger, not danger. And then if it says danger, is my best option to fight, to run, to not move, or to basically collapse and play dead?
It's funny that once you lay it all out, I didn't realize there was. I've heard of fight, flight, and freeze, but I didn't realize there was so many on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Um, but that is so funny when I had to keep from laughing when you said, and at the bottom is fainting.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny to imagine it. Actually, it reminds me. I was talking about this on a different episode. I was walking on a path and I was enjoying a beautiful sunset. And I literally, when I looked back at the path, there was a rattlesnake like
Oh,
right in front of me, and it was actually playing dead. I as soon as I saw it, I turned and ran. I was like 20 feet in the other direction in like 1.5 seconds. But as soon as I saw it, it was completely not moving and playing dead. When I went back to the same location, I had to check if it was still there. I thought it might have been fake or actually dead. But I guess it was in its fainting,
dude,
collapsing.
what are the chances that I literally just talked about the two dimensions and you just had a two-dimension experience? You went into the Jurassic Park. I'm gonna scram 100 meter. You could have won the Olympics in that
Yeah.
moment,
I
right?
was I was like 20 feet in the other direction in like 1 second. I saw that snake and I was like, ah.
That's
I didn't scream.
exactly.
I didn't scream like that, but maybe internally I did.
By the way, your body probably started moving before your brain registered what it was. That's how
For sure.
fast this survival system is. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the snake, and it's a funny thing because the survival mechanisms of collapse, of fainting, of immobility, we evolutionarily got those from reptiles.
Oh,
We
yeah.
retain that. We retain that. So the fact that the snake was in basically playing dead, our capacity to play dead, we got from him a long time ago.
Imagine if I went into my reptile brain and then I fainted too, and then I'm just laying there next to a snake.
But that's the amazing thing, man, is that depending on this is where like how do we help people? Depending on your constitution, depending on the adversities and traumas you went through and how you navigated them, another person in that same situation might have fainted.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully both them and the snake are would just lay there and
Yeah,
be scared of
exactly.
each other and just someone's gonna leave
Exactly.
first.
Exactly. I love that. What a
Yeah,
good example.
yeah. Um,
So we teach people first, like the reason why our book is called The Secret Language of the Body and not a pile of nervous system biohacks is that you have to understand the survival logic of the system. And you need to be able to tune into your body to know which states that we just described are kind of your default tendency. Everyone uses all of them at some point, depending on set and setting, situation, etc. But you need to understand, like, whoa, actually, when I'm in like, let's say, financial problems, well, I can feel it. I'm in freeze. I'm actually highly, highly anxious, but I also feel really stuck and tense. My body's trying to shut down. We call it the gas and the brake. I'm trying to shut down and actually avoid and withdraw and disassociate from this problem because it's too much. But I'm also on the gas, like I have to do something. So I'm going to go overthink, overwork, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's adaptive till it isn't, right? If that causes you to burn out or to fail or whatever, well, then that's not solving your money problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a whole host of techniques, but one of the first things we want to do, let's take that situation with freeze, guys, is that you actually want to mobilize sympathetic survival response. Anxiety is crying out for action, right? So exercise, contracting your body, yelling, going through certain physical activities to actually start mobilizing that survival energy can actually
Mm-hmm.
start to lessen your survival response and bring some of your executive functioning back on, right? So that's another way to look at it, guys. When that snake incident happened, Jeff, your executive function, your cognitive function, it's way too slow to save your life. Okay. So before you even caught up to snake, thank God your old brain was like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really perfect for snakes. It's
Mm-hmm.
really bad for a credit card bill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, if we would teach people what we call discharge techniques through their body to actively move some of that survival energy out the way evolution wants it to happen, so that then instead of the lower brain being in charge, your executive brain can come back on and be like, okay, wait, how do I actually solve this financial problem? Who do I need to call? Who do I need to connect with? Remember, when you're under stress, you don't connect, you isolate almost all the time. So,
Mm-hmm.
we teach people how to get out of that survival response so they can start making better choices and doing better options. And mindset work alone won't work because once that old brain is on, mindset work doesn't shift it.
Mm-hmm.
Physiology shifts it, the body
Mm-hmm.
shifts it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up recognizing what state you are in, because I had on my list to ask you, I have on my list here, what are some ways to regulate the nervous system? But then I probably should ask these in the other order is, how do you recognize, what are some ways to really recognize the state you're in? What I'm getting at is like, it's kind of easy to talk about doing movement to get stuff out of your body or doing breath work or something like that. But like in the heat of the moment, like when you're getting really triggered, um, do you have any tips on like recognizing that and pulling
Yeah.
yourself out without getting swept out to sea, if you will?
Yeah. So, uh, the first thing is that you're not going to really, I said most of us have a default pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we usually have maybe two to three defaults depending on the situation, right? So, I brought up the credit card bill where people are when faced with work or financial stress, they might go into that gas and brake at the same time. They might get really anxious and shut down at the same time. But other people relationally, okay, when they have a relational rupture, like a problem with their partner,
Mm-hmm.
they might have a very different response. They might go fully into fight, the fuck you, blame,
Big
aggression, right?
argument.
Right.
Yeah.
Or or they're the ones who just withdraw, shut down. I can't deal. I'm going to my room. Leave me alone. Right. This is very male. Right.
Right, right. Or
Male.
or let's go with like a huge example, like a big argument and then storm out of the room.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's you actually in one situation going from sympathetic fight to sympathetic flight. I'm getting out of here.
Right, right, right.
That's what's happening. Okay. Like all of these actions are always reduced to that spectrum, dude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all you got. That's what evolution and God gave you is this card deck. Okay. So
It's interesting. I had one another question I wanted to bring up is, and I've had challenges with anxiety myself in my life, and I noticed that it seems to be just hugely common in our society, in our culture, anxiety, depression, and like, tons of people are on needing medication for this. And like, on in the same time, we're not like in danger of being mauled by a lion on a daily basis, or like, we're not like constantly needing to hunt for our next meal and like in a constant fight with nature, like how we were when we were evolving. So, how do you explain that?
Okay, let me write another book. No, no. I do like to give pointed answers here. The first and most important survival experience you have is the attachment with your primary caregivers. Long before wolves are a fucking threat, okay? Long
Mm,
before home invasion, long before even, you know, being a toddler who's figuring out that it's dangerous to fall off a chair, right?
mm, mhm,
The very, 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 very first survival priority of a baby is getting its needs met by its mother and father, right? By its primary
mhm,
attachments. It will die right away if it doesn't bond with those caretakers. So
mhm,
never ever have any illusion that there's ever a greater survival priority for a human being than basically than the relational ones.
This is like why they say it's important to like hold the baby like skin to skin when it's born so that it can
Yes.
feel that kind of that connection.
It's vital. In fact,
Mm.
and there's remarkable studies, and they're tragic and horrible from the 19th century. There was a huge philanthropic movement in the 19th century to try to take care of orphans, orphaned babies. People are having babies all the time and just leaving them outside. Okay, so they poured a ton of money into this, and what they did is they created orphanages throughout England and America.
Mhm.
And what they did is they provided food and shelter and water and nourishment and cleanly environments for these babies, but they provided only enough staff to feed them and clean them.
Mm.
And and literally north of 50% of these children were just dying.
Oh, they'll just die.
They just die. It was called one of the terms was infant wasting syndrome. If a human organism, any mammal really, but anything, any living organism, but specifically mammals, are not regularly touched or contacted immediately upon birth, um, they die. The brain and the nervous system need contact input to stimulate growth.
Whoa.
And there's also more recently in the Soviet Union, it's fucking awful. There's documentaries on this. I don't think Vice did it. I forgot who did it, but like Romania or something about like in addition to infant wasting system, there's all this awful cases of dwarfism, awful mental deformities from these terrifying institutions that kept people alive, but um, but just they were in isolation, loneliness, abuse, all these sorts of things. So when you say like, why is everyone anxious? Okay, before we get into anything else, most people are raised with some level of what we call attachment injury. Because
Mhm.
in addition to that, just foundational touch, the most important nourishment you get from a mother and father is one, being seen, validated, having your emotional needs met, existing. Okay. And two is their emotional regulation. So if your parents are anxious, if your parents are about to extreme bouts of anger, that is not only is your nervous system literally learning that by osmosis, but it feels profoundly unsafe when the person who's supposed to protect it is given to flights of anger, right? Or if the person who's supposed to protect it is actually anxious and afraid all the time, the child's afraid all the time because it has no capacity to protect itself.
Mhm. Mhm.
So pervasive anxiety and most of our mental illness, it has a lot to do with culture, which we're not talking about right now, but it has almost everything to do with early development.
I see. Fascinating. So it's early development and attachment. I've heard that come up a lot, like attachment styles. And there's a book that I haven't read yet, but it's been recommended to me to read about like attachment styles and stuff. So what can someone do though? Like, let's go back to the example of like the big fight and then storming out of the room. How if you're working with a client who maybe is struggling with like having an incident like that, and then what would you tell them? Like, how can they
Yep.
what would they need
So
to
it,
work
we,
on?
we follow the breadcrumbs.
Okay.
I'll just go with your specific example here. If I am prone to bouts of anger in relation with my partner, rage is part of the fight response. So the question is, what is the threat or lack of safety that I'm not tracking in my mind body and my nervous system that is conditioned and causing me to execute an attack behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we have to start listening to our body. And I recommend a method called, I call it the slow-mo instant replay. Okay. But in this case, we're not looking at a touchdown pass. We're putting 90% of our attention on our body, and we're paying attention to things like breath, posture, the action that our body wants to take, and that's either what it's doing or what it wants to do. Like, you've been in a seat in some situation where like you're not moving, but all you want to do is leave, right? That's sort of action. Then there's sensations like, am I hot? Am I cold? Do I feel trapped? Am I feeling crushed? Am I feeling ripped apart? These kinds of things. And then there's emotion, right? So what I have people do with the slow-mo instant replays, 90% of your attention on your body. Jeff, you can do it right now. What's the last
Okay.
thing that stressed you out or caused you to flip your lid, or what's your pattern?
I would say it's interesting because I was looking at your Instagram and you had a big post about not feeling seen.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's like I'm going to like relationship wise is like if I'm in a relationship and I go to my partner and then I feel like she's not like doesn't really fully receive what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. But is your typical reaction to then get annoyed by that, or to feel if or like to shut down? What's your style?
I would say probably annoyed, but sometimes shut down.
Yeah, and
A
both can
little both.
happen depending on the intensity, right?
Yeah, a little both.
So just close your eyes, Jeff.
Okay.
All right. Keep it super simple. Pay attention just to the center of your chest, which includes your heart and your breath, but just that center area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just tune into that. 90% of your attention is there. 90%. Notice what's going on there now. And then all I want you to do, slow mo, is recollect that last unpleasant interaction where you were trying to say something, trying to get something to be understood, and it didn't land. Yeah, right there. Notice what happens in your body, especially around your chest, when you review that moment where you're trying to get something across, you're trying to get understood, you're trying to explain, and even before she responds, like you see it, she doesn't get it. Or right after she responds, it hits. So what happens in your chest and your heart as you remember that?
Hmm. I would say in the chest, if I could throw my attention there, I would say it feels kind of like adrenaline-ish.
Okay, there was adrenaline-ish. Was there any constriction? Squeezing,
Yeah.
any tension?
Yeah, maybe a little like depression, like when you exhale, and the chest goes down a little bit.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, a little depression, right?
Hmm.
Like you just took, maybe that's like I just got hit in the chest.
Hmm.
Ugh.
Hmm.
Okay. Emotional pain is interpreted by the same neurophysical pathways as physical pain.
Hmm.
Heartbreak, heartache is not a metaphor. It fucking hurts. And your brain is responsible for making you feel that pain. All right.
Hmm.
So just to we just did that little example, but for people who do that slow mo instant replay, in this case, there was adrenaline, there was a little sinking around the chest. I didn't ask, was there anywhere else in your body that you wanted to bring up, or did you have anything else to add?
No, not really. Yeah.
Okay. So we could slow mo that even longer, okay?
Hmm.
Because there are
Hmm.
these sequences. It's like bing, it's like dominoes, okay? But the frustration happens after that physical sensation of pain. The
Hmm.
the,
Hmm.
right, that something hurt. And no offense, bros, it was something soft and tender and childlike. And oh, she's supposed to love me. She doesn't, right? Because like, what's love? Love's being fucking seen, guys. Love's being understood. Love's love's having a hard time, and your mom going, I see that you're struggling, as opposed to, fuck you, pull it together, right? So that early emotional pain hurts, and it's a threat. It's a big T level threat. What am I going to do in the moment that I feel pain, especially because I'm unconscious to it? Because you don't want to feel that. You haven't felt that for 25 years, Jeff. Okay. 30 years. Um, I'm going to repress that. I'm not going to feel that part. And I'm going to deploy the survival mechanism. So, what I teach people is how to track that and try to start to feel that. And if you can actually learn to feel that collapse, that ouch,
Mm-hmm.
just like a fighter, if you have not been trained to take a punch, when that punch comes, you're either going to collapse or react wildly.
Mm-hmm.
When you've been trained to take a hit and stay conscious and stay present, you can actually stay present in that relational rupture, dude, that fight. Take a breath. Be like, whoa, I'm about to go into fight, but I'm not going to fight because I'm angry. I'm going into fight because I hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I know this sounds like it's deep, but this is part of this is part of nervous system regulation, guys. You got to deal with the actual problem. The
Yeah,
problem ain't
yeah.
her. The problem is your feeling of hurt that you don't know how to fucking handle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think another interesting thing, it's like it almost feels like a hard conversation to even get into. And maybe I'm completely projecting this. Maybe it's just my internal issue that I need to figure out. But also feel like in our society, there's some level of like you shouldn't need to be seen and you should be like internally completely like self-sufficiently taken care of, you know?
Oh,
And
dude, not only is that what society tells us, especially men,
mhm.
but just bear with me. If a man, let's say if anyone has been deeply hurt over and over again in their primary attachments, mother and father, or relationally, or had their heart broken over and over again, and they've learned that basically feeling and emotions are always painful. Well, a great strategy is not only am I not going to feel that, I'm not going to have any fucking needs, right?
Mm,
You're on a yeah, this podcast started off as this fucking survival podcast, right? Like what's the epitome of I can't trust people, then I'm going to survive completely by myself and never need them.
mm, mm.
For an inherently tribal mammal, okay? You're a bloody primate. No primate lives by himself. You ain't no cat, and even cats are social, okay?
Yeah, we're
So
pack animals by nature.
exactly. And so the isolation and self-sufficiency is part of that survival spectrum. I can't handle this pain, so I'm not going to be in it at all. So I'm going to self-isolate and pretend that I'm totally self-sufficient. And by the way, that can be functional. It can work. You can make a lot of money. You can be successful. You can have cars. You can have a good body, but you still cannot, you might not have a relationship.
Mm, yeah, that's you're keeping it real on the podcast. Let's see here. How do you feel about the statement, this is just the way I am?
Am I allowed to growl?
I-
Yeah. So, um, I hate this statement for a variety of reasons. People wear it as a badge of honor, but I think it's a statement of cowardice. Two, um, most of your guests have probably heard of neuroplasticity, which is the brain's capacity to change from the simplest thing of like learning new stuff, right? To being able to uh, learn how to go from being terrified of public speaking to being comfortable and empowered public speaking. This is all because the brain is designed with the right support and circumstances to learn, change, and become more adaptive than less adaptive. And so when someone says, like, until people really do the deep work that we've just described, till they understand the pain that drives their lives and that their entire personality is being constructed to avoid, you don't know shit about the way you really are. Okay. Um, similarly, no, I'll just say that. And so when you say this is just the way I am, I call it neuroconcrete. You've just done the opposite of plasticity. You are stubbornly deciding to dig in your heels because you either are unaware, unwilling, or don't know how to really investigate how you came to be who you are. And by the way, for the people who have done this work, there maybe I won't say this is just the way they am. We all do have a natural way of being. We all have temperaments. We all have proclivities. We all have skills, right? We all maybe have a tendency to be on the spectrum towards solitude rather than like that introvert extrovert. But but until you've really dug into those, to see what's fixed because you're surviving shit you can't handle versus what's sort of um, natural, you, you can't make that statement with integrity.
Well said. You mentioned that a lot of people don't realize how much their pain and trauma is driving their life. And I have these conversations with a lot of people on the podcast about healing and that kind of thing. And sometimes I kind of apply these thoughts to like the politicians of the world, and I'm like, man, like looking at it through the lens of like people who are just the subconscious is steering the ship, or their pain is kind of driving the story. And then I apply it to like the larger scheme of things and I go, oh my God,
Yeah,
more people need to read your book, man.
I'm with you. They know they do, and the God's honest truth is that the most amazing things and the most horrible things that have ever happened, really in human history, especially modern human history, have been trauma responses, right?
Mm.
Like, um, if you think about World War II and the Holocaust, uh, you had a collective European-wide catastrophic. Like, no one, unless people that study it, and even people that study it, no one really understands just how we're still dealing with the consequences of World War One and how like I can't even get the words out for how bad it was and how many people died and like and 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 how many people who did survive just were never the same. If you watch old videos of the shell shock, like it's just when the trauma of World War One was insane. And then you look at someone like Adolf Hitler and his catastrophic wounds, not just the trauma of the war, but then like all the shit that happened to him as a kid and his agony and absolute inability to be himself. And he became an insane, charismatic leader that murdered millions of people, right? Like it's all still born. The genesis is out of this. The amount of energy that a human being is capable of deploying into the world to get away from intolerable feelings cannot be underestimated.
Yeah, man. It's crazy. It's crazy, man. Hey, you mentioned neuroplasticity. This is a word that we love on the podcast, neuroplasticity. And we do have a lot of people who incorporate psychedelics into their practice, especially for that purpose to induce more layers of neuroplasticity. Do you have any opinions on psychedelics or where the culture is going in that direction?
Yeah. So let's see where to start with that one. Neuroplasticity, in and of itself, is amoral. So the use of psychedelics for the generic purpose of making your mind more malleable can go left or right, up or down. Um, it could quote unquote heal you, or it could quote unquote wonderfully reinforce the alternate reality that you've already started constructing to not be you. Let's just start there, folks.
Mm-hmm.
I am so fucking allergic and so fucking against all of the generic non-contextual, non-intentional, non-rigorous, and non-critical application of these substances. Stop. Stop. Um, especially if you like if you're doing it like in the healing or like life hacking kind of way, like if you just love psychedelics and you like seeing fish all the time and it's just like you do you, like I'm fine with that. Okay. I really am. And then even there, that's intentional and contextual, right? Like I do these drugs to have exceptional times. And like what I am is what are they, a psychonaut, right? That's just like my jam.
Mhm.
Great. Good for you.
Mhm.
But if you really are trying to use it in a healing context, in a development context, it really, it needs a lot of set and setting, a lot of
Yeah.
set and setting and intention. And inside set and setting and intention, um, I would never advise any of my clients or students to do psychedelics before they've started mastering the principles of nervous system regulation and understanding how they work and understanding their coping patterns, because it's too easy to just have then psychedelics rationalize, invent, or reinforce the false narratives and untrue understandings you have of why you are the way you are. So
Mhm.
so let's just, with all that warning in there and that like little bit of me being on my soapbox of like stop it. Um, when you are armed with really understanding the nervous system, when you're armed with understanding attachment, when you're armed with understanding that your survival mechanisms and need to protect yourself will hijack and morph and mutate your cognition, your thought patterns, your narratives, and your frameworks of the world. When you know all of that, and also ideally when you're supported by skilled guides or clinicians, psychedelics can be the absolute most powerful and remarkable things. For one, allowing you to access some of that pain we were talking about without it destroying you. Like that's one of the
Mhm.
most wonderful things about psychedelics is that, remember, you've built up every coping pattern you've had, every avoidance pattern you have, most of your personality, most of your thought patterns, most of your idea to avoid that place you don't want to go, which you've locked up and thrown away the key that you don't even know it's there. Okay. And then maybe in therapy, you've learned about it, you've talked about it, but you still can't go there. Psychedelic assisted therapy makes that possible. And then not only can we go there, but we can re experience it and rewire it. Not that it goes away or never happened, but that you no longer have to deploy survival mechanisms to escape your own pain.
Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well said. And I appreciate what you said about people really understanding your nervous system and like doing some serious work before you go to such a powerful substance.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm glad they exist. I'm glad they're becoming popular, but I just know so many people who don't have the foundation, the grounding, and the knowledge. And these people are on their 47th ayahuasca journey, right? Or they're just pounding DMT and they think they're getting somewhere and they're not. And in fact, they're probably permanently harming their capacity because they've just uncoupled themselves from I'm just gonna say that they've just uncoupled themselves.
So by uncoupled, you mean like a little bit ungrounded, like a little bit too.
Ungrounded, they don't have reality, and actually, like again, plasticity is amoral. It just happens, and then it'll just take in and reinforce, and then reconcretize into a new formation. And there's no one saying that's better. In fact, if you look at the research, let's say talk about around MDMA, the research is showing that one of the things MDMA does is that it temporarily actually reallows for plasticity in the cells of the brain that are responsible for housing your relational patterns, whether you trust people or not, for example. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is some of the latest research out of what's her name? Dual Golan. Um, Dual Golan? Yeah.
Okay.
Gould Gould.
Okay.
Incredible researcher out of I'm pretty sure Stanford.
Okay.
Um, She's the one who gave MDMA to an octopus, if you ever heard about that.
Whoa, no, I never heard about that.
So you guys can go look into that. Anyway, they're great 3 hour podcasts and stuff with her. So it replasticizes that part of your brain. Great. But if it replasticizes that side of the brain and you're in an abusive relationship, it's just going to reinforce bad relational dynamics.
Mm,
So just know that when you're using psychedelics to allow parts of your brain to rewrite themselves, there's nothing influencing whether it's going to rewrite itself in a more adaptive and useful way, other than the set and setting and who's holding it
mm,
and what the intention is. And even then, it
yeah.
does what it wants. But that's what we do.
That's interesting that you say even then it does what it wants.
Yeah, well, in a way, it does what it wants, but it tends to get you to your intention and your purpose, just never the way you wanted to get there, right?
Mm,
But again, that's why these buffers of set and setting and intention and guided support are really important. And I think them being grounded in the evolutionary nervous system reality of your body, as well as then maybe the mystical or the shamanic, right? But that I think I made my point.
yeah, you did. You said it very well, and I like that phrase you used. The evolutionary. What was it? The evolutionary
Like
nervous
the
system.
evolutionary neural, like the evolutionary nervous system basis for how you function. Like we should have that as part of the bedrock of what we know, what we because I'll just say this, because of what I know, when I go into MDMA assisted psychotherapy, when I'm the client,
Hmm.
instead of just like either going along for the ride or uh, having to abstractly understand my experience because I don't know what's going on. When I go back into, for example, a feeling of hopelessness and awful pain from my childhood when on that NDMA journey, I'm able to go, oh, I'm accessing some of my early attachment wound traumas. Right now, I'm in a place where, as a child, I was hopeless and disconnected and had no one to help me.
Hmm.
Whoa. Now that I'm here, knowing what I know, how could I do this differently? Oh, well, one, I might do some inner child work. In the real time on that drug, I might be like, hey, my nickname as a kid was Cardi. Hey, I'm here. You're not alone. Or I might orient to one of my guides and say, I'm stuck where I was when I was a kid. I need you to be with me. Right? Because I know, because of what I'm trained in, that what I really needed was healthy relation and attachment. And simply at that point, having that person, that guide, hold my hand, and either they'll intuitively say, or I might say, can you just tell me that I matter? And they'll say something like, Carden, you matter. And fuck, that hits when you're on MDMA with the part of your brain that's become positively neuroplastic or amorally neuroplastic. Now I'm having a positive imprint.
Wow.
That's what's possible when and again, you don't want to direct the show and you can't. I'm just saying, ooh, did you ever see Empire Strikes Back?
Oh yeah.
Right. Remember when like Yoda, when Luke wants to go into that like dark part of the forest, the jungle,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he goes like, "What's in there?" And he goes, "Only what you take with you." Right. And then he puts on his like lightsaber and shit. He's like, "You're not gonna need that." And he's like, "Fuck you, I want it anyway." Right. But like you go into a psychedelic experience not only with set and setting, but you go in there with the knowledge you have. You go in there with the skills you have. You go in there with the self relations you have. And the more of that you have, the more skills you have, the more awareness you have, the wider your palette to do positive things in that setting are.
Do you talk about inner child work in the book?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, what you said, what you were talking about during your MDMA therapy and talking to your inner child, it reminded me of like IFS. I'm sure you've heard of like internal
Yeah,
family
a
systems,
hundred
and
percent. Yeah.
I think is it Dick Schwartz?
Yes, that's who he is.
Yeah, I've done some IFS stuff with my therapist, and it's like mind-blowingly amazing. So,
Yeah.
um,
So imagine just like you're right on board with me, Jeff, here, and let's just say MDMA assisted IFS therapy is pretty fucking rocking.
I bet it is. I have some friends. I'm out here in California, so I have a lot of friends, or not a lot, but a few friends who have done MDMA therapy, and they're just like they say it's beyond amazing. I feel like I didn't realize the conversation was going to go this direction, but I feel like I'll have to have you back on another time and we'll do like a whole like MDMA therapy episode.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I'm I've I still have so much more to learn and so much more to learn. Um, but my contribution is really showing the intersection of these things.
mhm.
Right? Um,
Yeah,
and
I appreciate that. I think like someone, whether they're going to do psychedelics or not, they could read your book and gain some tools for understanding their nervous system and regulating their own nervous system. So that way they have those tools when they introduce a powerful psychedelic medicine.
yeah, exactly right. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we are getting like close to our time. But do you want to tell me a little bit about Somia International?
Yeah. So as we started off, I'm not a trauma practitioner, or I don't have all this knowledge about trauma, primarily because what I like to do is heal trauma. I have all this knowledge because I use it and repurpose it for getting people unsick,
Mhm.
right? So folks come to Somia International, which is the home for me and my partners, courses and community where we teach people how to use the principles of nervous system regulation, trauma therapy, uh, polyvagal therapeutics, which take advantage of something called the vagus nerve, which I'm sure you guys have talked about, but again, by itself is insufficient. Okay. We also have another component. We bring together a fusion of practices that solve two problems. Well, the main one is to get people unsick, as I said, and that would be from nervous system based disorders, chronic pain, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, uh, post viral syndromes like Lyme and COVID, a whole range of gut issues, a whole range of autoimmune issues, all of these things, right? And we basically do two things at once with people. We teach them how to, in a generalized fashion, regulate their nervous system so that it's simply out of survival mode and functioning better. And that shift in and of itself is as sufficient as or as impactful as when you go from eating shit to eating clean, right? Like without any other specifics, everyone just gets these net awesome improvements in health, right?
Mhm.
So that's one big component is we are going to teach you how to basically clean up and optimize your nervous system in the same way that you clean up and optimize your diet so that just everything starts working better. And so many of these symptoms either go away or reduce. Jeff, you want to jump in? You got something there?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask regarding regulating the nervous system and teaching people how to do it. Are these practices that someone would implement like when they're becoming triggered, or is it more of like a daily practice that keeps you at more of a baseline?
Yes. So meaning both. So the former is actually more important, meaning we're uh, prescriptive learning is a totally manufactured process that we created to like teach in school. Developmental learning is not prescriptive. Developmental learning is totally responsive, right? How does a kid learn how to use Legos? In the moment that he's exposed to Legos and wants to learn how to do it because he's excited, right?
Mhm.
How does a kid learn to regulate their emotions? Because they have an emotional experience which upsets them. Their parent is there to help them work through it. And then like all learning is spontaneous and responsive. The best learning is spontaneous and responsive. All right. So
Mhm.
we teach people how to deploy nervous system regulation in real time. And that's one of the best ways to do it because when's a better time to practice than when you need it? That being said, in the same way that it's helpful to like go to the gym and train for your sport, right? We then have daily practices that are toning or are preparatory to make you more successful when you need to use these things in the moment. So it's both.
Great, great.
Great. And then the second part that what we do is, or the I guess the three, the second one is very tactical. Um, Most mind body symptoms that remain after you've cleaned up your nervous system are, to oversimplified, Pavlovian or Skinner level conditioned response. So I smell bacon and I drool. Okay.
Hmm.
Someone who developed a dysregulated response to mold while their body was in survival mode for 30 years due to the unprocessed trauma and dysregulated nervous system, they might still have a conditioned response even after they've regulated their nervous system, that when mold is around, their brain and immune system deploys the inappropriate inflammatory response.
Whoa.
Okay. And
Yeah.
we teach people how to uncouple that conditioning. Same with most food intolerances. There's one thing maybe we'll wrap on. Um, the contemporary approach to gut issues through cleaning up through beyond just healthy eating. Okay, so like I want people to eat well. Okay, but but there's a lot of people who have gut issues that eat well, but they're still having gut issues, right? And then all of a sudden, like by the way, eating well, I include whole grain sourdough bread, right? But there are all these people who now have an issue with that. Celiac accepted, okay? Or what's good food? Dairy, probiotic, whole food milk, whatever, but people can't have milk, et cetera, et cetera. What people who have gut issues, the primary cause of gut issues is nervous system dysregulation. Because if your brain's effed up and you're in survival mode, the first thing that the body shuts down when it's in survival mode is the gut, right? That's why when you get scared, you shit and pee yourself. Okay, it's pure survival. Um, Digestion is not prioritized when you're under threat. The
Mhm.
body just turns it off, guys. Okay, or overactivates it. It can do whatever it wants. But point is, it messes up your gut. In the modern way of food elimination, have you ever met anyone who goes down the food elimination path that ultimately can start eating more foods? No, because food elimination teaches the brain and body that food is dangerous. And it increases the conditioned response between food and fear, food and fear,
Oh,
food and fear. Plus,
wow.
food is dangerous, gut issues, inflammatory responses. It's the exact opposite of what you should do. It's the exact opposite of, if you will, getting back on the horse, right? And so anyone who knows this, when they go down the elimination diet route to do healing, they might get short-term symptom improvements, but within months, their symptoms find another way to come up. And also over the years, they can eat less and less and less because they are reinforcing the survival nervous system and they're reinforcing the conditioned response. We teach them how to uncouple that.
Wow. Amazing.
So that's what Somia International does. That's what the HEAL program does through a constellation of integrative approaches. And it works just as well for anxiety and depression as it does for those disorders. But what we're here for more than anything is to help people heal their bodies.
I love that. So the book is called The Secret Language of the Body. Regulate your nervous system, heal your body, free your mind. It's got it right there on the screen. I'm excited to check it out and see what other tools I can dig out of there. But as we wrap this up, I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this stuff with the audience. Where can people find you if they want to know more?
The best place is Instagram at Karden Rabin. And then our company account at Somia International. And we are just always dishing out the good stuff. Um, if you check out my link in bio on Instagram, we got lots of free resources, including something called the Nervous System Practice Pack, where a lot of the practices I didn't get to lead today are on there to kind of like get your feet wet. And those are the best places. Take some action, get the book. Just like this stuff will change your life.
I love it. Thank you again so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you later.